Hello, I am Professor Kino and welcome to my Office of Cinematic Antiquity. Today we'll be talking about Toy Story was my jam as a kid. The amount of times I've seen Toy Story 1 and Toy Story 2 is nuts. But unlike a lot of people, I'd say a lot of the Zurg scenes from 2 are what stick out the most for some reason. I mean, Sid as well, of course, but Zurg. And I even fondly remember watching the Buzz Lightyear of Star Command cartoon as a kid and playing its associated Game Boy Color game. And even though the latter is pretty bad, I have such good memories of it. Mostly of how hard it was. Damn. But still, despite all of this, I think I've only seen Toy Story 3 once. It was a huge cultural phenomenon, I know, but I just never got around to seeing it a lot. That didn't stop me from being hesitant toward Toy Story 4 though. I definitely felt that Toy Story 3 was the perfect end to the series, and if I'm being honest, I found the Toy Story 4 trailers to be merely alright. Nothing wowed me. Nevertheless, faith in Pixar I do have, and I went to see the franchise's latest installment. So, was I right to be worried? Premise. Now that Andy has gifted Woody, Buzz, and the gang to Bonnie, they are forced to adapt to their new situation amidst unexpected twists, joyous reunions, and genuinely heartbreaking surprises. Writing. The biggest hurdle that this film needed to clear was making itself feel like a natural continuation of the Toy Story franchise. And while I don't think that the final result feels fully necessary, it does succeed in bringing something new to the table. Toy Story 3 originally concluded the trilogy with the idea and message of knowing when to move on, when to grow up. Andy giving his toys to Bonnie at the end of that film marked his transition from child to adult. And even though I don't think that giving up your toys means that you're suddenly an adult, I am a firm believer in the idea that grown-ups can own toys, and conversely, not owning toys doesn't inherently make you more mature. I love the message that Toy Story 3 was going for. Andy didn't give away his toys out of some malicious intent, some unhealthy desire to purge himself of his childlike tendencies. He did it because he understood what his toys meant to him growing up, and understood the way that they shaped who he is. However, he also knew that their significance in his life had begun to dissipate, so instead of holding on to them until they were gathering dust only to be extracted on special nostalgic occasions, Andy made the tough decision to give Woody and Buzz and Jessie and Bullseye to someone who would be able to get more out of them, to give them to someone who would be impacted by them in the way that he once was, but no longer is. This type of choice is a difficult one to make and one that requires a lot of bravery, but Andy made it so that he could move forward with his life without needing to look back, and so that Woody and the others would be able to get the chance to be played with and not forgotten. In many ways, it was kind of like a healthy breakup, where both parties go their separate ways out of a respect for each other's interests and future. It was the perfect bittersweet ending for the trilogy. But now there is a fourth film out, so what does it do to warrant its existence? While Toy Story 3 was the somber and they lived happily ever after moment for the franchise, Toy Story 4 is the or did they asterisk at the bottom of the page. It would be great to imagine that Andy went on to become a successful happy billionaire and that Woody and the gang connected with Bonnie in the same exact way that they did with Andy. But that wouldn't be realistic, and this is a Pixar film. Waterworks are always included with the price of admission. And Toy Story 4 goes straight for the gut. It does not hesitate in presenting us with an alternative interpretation of Toy Story 3's ending. It doesn't undermine it at all, don't worry, but it makes it clear, and I'm not sure how I didn't see this earlier, that Andy's decision to give Woody his favorite toy to Bonnie was entirely Andy's decision. Woody had no or little say in it. While Woody seemed fine with the situation at first glance, that's only because he loves Andy too much to go against him. Andy is his kid after all. In reality, Woody wasn't ready to move on in the way that Andy was, and consequently, Woody is still hung up on Andy. Bringing it back to the relationship breakup analogy, Andy was the one who did the breaking up, and while Woody accepted it, he is still struggling to move on from it. And Toy Story 4 is a film about his journey to overcome the feeling of being left behind. And everything that happens to Woody in this film plays with this foundation. From Woody trying to recapture the times he had with Andy with Bonnie but it never playing out the way he wants it to feeling ashamed and sad when Bonnie picks every other toy to play with except him, literally every other toy to be honest, to Woody making it his ultimate goal to teach Forky, the MacGyvered kindergarten companion that Bonnie made out of trash, understand how important he is to Bonnie because Woody sees that the love that Bonnie has for Forky is the same that Andy had for him. It all works together to enhance Woody's feelings of abandonment and journey to heal himself. And everything happening around him also adds to this. For example, there was a huge plot line revolving around abandoned toys, forgotten toys, lost toys, toys that were discarded by kids before a bond could be made, and even toys that have simply never had a kid before and desperately want one. And even though the film doesn't always work perfectly and periodically loses its focus and misses the mark at times, the villain is merely fine, some classic characters are unceremoniously pushed to the sidelines, and at times the film goes off the rails thematically. For example, I've seen some critics mention one strange instance where a character does something that could be taken as the film putting an oddly nonchalant and accepting spin on organ harvesting, and while I personally wouldn't go that far, I do agree that the whole moment doesn't come off as smooth and endearing as I believe the filmmakers had intended it to. As a whole, I'd say that Toy Story 4 succeeds in what it sets out to do. Continue the Toy Story franchise in a way that feels natural and adds some extra depth to the brand in the process, even if it doesn't always hit the mark and in many ways doesn't feel fully necessary. Acting. All the returning cast members are as great as always. Tom Hanks, Tim Allen, Annie Potts, Joan Cusack, Wallace Shawn, John Ratzenberger, Jeff Garlin, Christian Shaw, and all the rest. Fantastic. Did you even have any doubts? Who I really want to talk about are the newcomers, and they are also excellent. Tony Hale does a stupendous job at making Forky, who could have easily become an annoying nuisance, an actually funny and entertaining character. Christina Hendricks as Gabby Gabby is suitably calm and yet creepy, charming yet standoffish. It's fascinating work. Ally Mackey as Giggle McDimples is probably one of the weaker of the new cast members, but not because she is bad in the role, it's mostly just that the role doesn't have much for Mackey to work with. But she puts the work in and is entertaining nonetheless. Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele as Ducky and Bunny, on the other hand, are hysterical. I'm not sure what was written and what was ad-libbed, but everything that they said had my whole theater rolling with laughter. If there is a Toy Story 5, I really hope that they come back. Similarly, Keanu Reeves as Duke Kaboom is equally hysterical. He totally overacts, but in the best way possible. He steals all the scenes he's in. I loved him. And finally, at least for the toy characters, Carl Weathers kills it as the Combat Carls in the 2-ish scenes that they are in. It is a remarkable feat that Weathers is able to stand out in a movie when he has so little screen time and when he always shares the screen with legends such as Tom Hanks and Annie Potts, but he succeeds at it. And lastly, the human characters, Bonnie, her mom, and her dad, aka Madeline McGraw, Lori Allen, and Jay Hernandez, were good, but definitely not the focus of the film. They are solid, but just felt like your typical human characters in an animated family movie where humans are the focus, but not. Character design. The characters look as good as we have always seen them, but even more pristine and detailed. I adore how much like, well, toys the main toy characters look, and how different they all are. Each toy has not only a unique personality, but unique movements, and there was quite a variety of materials that make up each toy, from stuffing to plastic to rubber. All of this just makes every toy feel distinct. From more horrific toys like the ventriloquist dummies, to more clunky toys like the Combat Carls, to more delicate toys like Bo Peep's sheep. Every toy is extremely well designed. And the human characters also look really good. They aren't photorealistic, but they weren't designed to be that way. Each human character looks like a cartoony human, and this is important, they also look drastically different from the toys. Not so much so as to make the characters feel different aesthetically, but the skin of the human characters looks more like skin as opposed to plastic or rubber or felt or wool. It's never enough to make the two varieties of characters feel off when compared to each other, just suitably different from each other. All in all, the character design in this film is the best it's ever been in the franchise. Set design. There are two memorable sets in this film. The first being an antique shop. It is full of so many random things. You know, the stuff that you can only find in an antique shop. All over the place. It's great. And what makes it even better are the small details in it. The dust bunnies and cobwebs behind shelves, for example. Altogether, it adds a very creatively dense location for the film, and it adds a nice amount of slight horror to this otherwise family-friendly flick. The second memorable set is a traveling carnival. It isn't super unique, especially since the past few years have featured a bit of an overabundance of carnivals, but it allows the film to explore some new things in the Toy Story universe that I had never considered before, i.e. what the prize toys at a fun fair are like. The remainder of the sets serve their respective purposes, but are never really the focus of the scenes, and many we have seen before in earlier Toy Story films. Bedrooms, etc. All in all, the sets are well realized, but I didn't find them all that standout. Choreography. I wouldn't say that this film has stellar action per se, but the way that the film uses the designs of all the toys, their materials, and in a sense abilities is always fun to watch. Whether characters bounce or clunk, are made of stuffing or plastic, wield weapons or drive vehicles, the action here is always fun and uses the characters in unique, creative, and entertaining ways. Cinematography. This film looks pretty good. I'm not going to stop and say that the cinematography here is mind-blowing, but everything is always framed nicely and the camera work matches the tone of each scene, meaning the slightly spooky scenes in the antique shop feature more horror-like elements, for instance. However, some of the best moments of this film are when the toy's drama meets hectic human action, and during these scenes, the camera is angled to make the human characters seem like massive beasts, like kaiju in monster films. It's fun, definitely, but I didn't find the cinematography better or worse than the previous 3 Toy Story films. Editing. The editing of this film is solid, no more, no less. I didn't find it distracting, nor did I find it particularly creative. It does what it needs to do, keep the film flowing at a good speed. CGI. The quality of computer animation keeps getting crisper and crisper, at least when care is given, and let's be honest, the necessary money allocated. And Toy Story 4 looks crisp. While the characters are clearly animated and cartoony, most are toys, so that's to be expected, the environments here, the grass, the buildings, the weather effects, all look very real. This is just an incredible looking animated movie, down to the smallest detail. For instance, I love the motion of Forky's pipe cleaner arms so much, they moved in the way that a pipe cleaner would. And that attention to detail is just fantastic. The CGI in Toy Story 4 is some of the best I've ever seen in an animated film. Music. From the classic You Got a Friend in Me to a generally very playful and lighthearted sounding set of tracks, the music for this film is very much in line with the others of the franchise. It's pretty iconic throughout, and if I ever heard any of the songs on the radio, I'm pretty sure I'd immediately go, "That's from Toy Story." But it's not just iconic, it's a fitting soundtrack to this film, and because of that, it's quite excellent.
You've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. When the road looks rough ahead and you're miles and miles from your nice warm bed.
Direction. This is the first feature-length film directed by Josh Cooley, and he did a solid job. I don't think he did anything wholly unique when compared to the previous 3 films, but the final result is a solid Toy Story entry. But to be honest, I'm pretty sure Pixar and Disney wouldn't have allowed him to drop the ball. Nevertheless, Cooley continued the franchise nicely, and honestly, that's quite the achievement for someone without much directorial experience. My enjoyment. I liked it. It was like comfort food. It went down easy, it was satisfying, and it was everything that I wanted and have come to expect when watching a Toy Story movie. Although it's not one that I think I'll be coming back to time and time again like Toy Story 1 and 2. Enjoyable? Very. Worthy of the franchise name? Most assuredly. The best of the set? Definitely not. I liked it. That pretty much sums it up in a nutshell. Recommendations. If you like Toy Story, this is more of the same. It's a good continuation, so I recommend that if you are a fan, you should go and see this flick. However, if you are really against the idea of another Toy Story, like really against it, I'd steer clear. While I do think that this film does do enough to prove a lot of naysayers wrong, it doesn't do enough to make it a home run. It's definitely a really solid entry to the franchise with stellar voice acting, amazing animation, and an intriguing story, but despite this, it doesn't do enough to shake the fact that this film is unnecessary. I mean, should you see it? Totally, it's fully worth your time and money. However, I would say that it does fall just a hair shy of the extremely high standards set by its predecessors. Thanks for watching, I hope you liked it. If you did, leave a like. If you want to add anything, feel free to leave a comment. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I am Professor Kino, and I look forward to our next discussion.